hot grease popping in a cast iron skillet. That sound leaked through the walls of a rented room above a barbershop in Bronzeville, 1925, and every neighbor on the block knew what it meant. The woman at the stove had no menu and no business license. She had a pan of seasoned lard and 40 people in her front room by 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. For 13 years, Prohibition shut every legal bar in America, but it never shut a black kitchen. In the speakeasies, buffet flats, and rent parties of the South and the Great Migration cities, food was the real cover charge. Number 19 fed a whole block from one pot. Number 10 got a speakeasy raided for nothing but the smell leaking through the walls. When Prohibition ended, the cocktail bars came back. The kitchens behind the unmarked doors did not. So hit subscribe, because here are 30 black speakeasy dishes that disappeared after Prohibition ended. Number 30, fried chicken gizzard plate. In the buffet flats of Harlem and Bronzeville, gizzards were the cheapest thing the poultry man had. Seasoned in salt and cayenne, dropped into a skillet of smoking lard, they came out with a crunch that cracked between the teeth. A full plate cost almost nothing and came with hot sauce and a torn piece of bread. The women running those kitchens bought gizzards by the pound from market stalls that would have thrown them out by morning. When Prohibition ended and the flats shuttered, no legal restaurant picked the gizzard plate up. It was too cheap and too plain. It belonged to a world the city was trying to pretend never happened. Number 29, hot tamales from the barrel. Along the gravel roads of the Mississippi Delta, a woman with a push cart or a steaming barrel outside a juke joint door sold tamales wrapped in corn husks for pennies. The filling was pork shoulder or whatever the butcher let go that day, spiced with cayenne and black pepper, steamed until the husk darkened. These were not Mexican tamales, and nobody called them that. They were Delta tamales, smaller, spicier, and tied to the juke joint the way peanuts belong to a ballpark. After Prohibition, the juke joints that survived went legal, and the ones that did not took the tamale barrel with them. By the 1940s, the Delta tamale was a memory on a gravel road. Before going any further, for those who want the recipes and kitchen traditions from these videos gathered in one place, they have been put together in a book called Big Mama's Soul Food Kitchen, available at our website, thehungryhistorian.com. That is the only mention. If it interests you, it is there. Now back to the list. Number 28, smothered liver and onions. Beef liver cost next to nothing in the 1920s because most butcher shops could not move it fast enough. In the back rooms of black speakeasies from Atlanta to Detroit, it got sliced thin, dredged in flour, and smothered under a heap of caramelized onions and thick brown gravy. The plate was heavy and filling, which was the point. Customers who ate well drank longer and spent more. After repeal in 1933, the speakeasy kitchens that served it closed, and legal restaurants had no interest in a dish built for a room that was never supposed to exist. Liver landed on diner menus eventually, but that speakeasy version, drowned in onions and served on a tin plate, was gone. Number 27, fried whiting sandwich. Whiting was the cheapest fish at the Harlem market and at the docks along the Gulf Coast. In buffet flats and backroom bars, a woman fried it whole in a cast iron pan, pressed it between sliced bread, and handed it across a counter that doubled as a card table. The sandwich cost less than a glass of the gin it was meant to chase. Whiting was bony and mild, but seasoned right and fried crisp, it held its own. After Prohibition, fried fish stayed, but the whiting sandwich built for a speakeasy counter disappeared. The fish itself became cat food by the 1950s. The sandwich never recovered its name. Number 26, deviled crab. On the Carolina coast and the Gulf Shore, black speakeasies near the water served the deviled crab, packed back into the shell and baked until the top browned. The filling was crab meat mixed with breadcrumbs, mustard, cayenne, and a splash of Worcestershire. It was finger food for a room full of people standing shoulder to shoulder with drinks in their hands. The shells went back to the kitchen and got refilled all night. When the coastal speakeasies closed after repeal, the deviled crab shells went with them. Legal seafood restaurants served crab cakes on a plate with a fork. Nobody brought back the shell. That small difference erased the entire tradition. Number 25, red beans with ham bone. Red beans and rice was already a Monday tradition in New Orleans, but in the black speakeasies of Treme and the 7th Ward, it served a different purpose. A pot of red beans simmering on a stove in the back of a bar room stretched one ham bone into food for 40 people on a Saturday night. The beans were thick enough to stand a spoon in and seasoned with bay leaf, thyme, and whatever end of a sausage somebody brought through the door. After Prohibition, the legal bars in New Orleans served drinks without food. The communal pot of red beans that fed a speakeasy crowd had no table to sit on anymore. Number 24, spare ribs with vinegar mop sauce. Spare ribs were the cheapest rack the butcher sold, and in the juke joints of Alabama, Mississippi, and East Texas, they got rubbed with salt and black pepper and slow cooked over a pit dug in the yard behind the building. The sauce was vinegar, red pepper flakes, and a little sugar mopped on with a rag tied to a stick. There was no bottled sauce. There was no recipe card. The pitmaster knew when they were done by the way the bone pulled clean. After repeal, the juke joints that survived moved the liquor inside and let the pit go cold. The ribs, cooked over open fire behind an illegal bar, became something nobody could legally replicate. Number 23, Hoppin' John with fatback. Black-eyed peas, cooked down with rice and a slab of fatback, was a New Year's dish across the Black South, but in speakeasies it showed up year-round. It was cheap to make in bulk and it filled the room. In the rent parties of Harlem, a pot of Hoppin' John on the stove was part of the admission price. A quarter at the door bought food, music, and a packed apartment. The money went straight to the landlord. After Prohibition, rent parties faded as Harlem's economy shifted. The communal pot of Hoppin' John that once paid someone's housing disappeared from the table it was built to save. Number 22, corn fritters. The corn fritter served the same purpose in a blind pig as peanuts serve in a modern bar. It kept hands busy and mouths salty. The batter was cornmeal, a little flour, salt, and fresh corn kernels when the season allowed. Dropped by the spoonful into hot lard, they puffed up golden and got stacked on a plate near the door. Nobody charged for them separately. They came with the drink. When the blind pigs of Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Washington closed after repeal, the fritters lost their home. No restaurant served free corn fritters to make customers thirsty. The business model vanished and the fritters went with it. Number 21, sweet potato biscuits, a breakfast offering in the buffet flats of Chicago and St. Louis. These biscuits were served to guests who had stayed the night. They were dense, faintly sweet, and made with mashed sweet potato folded into the dough before baking. They soaked up gravy or stood alone with a cup of chicory coffee. The women who ran those flats baked them before dawn and stacked them under a cloth on the kitchen counter. After 1933, the overnight buffet flat trade collapsed. The breakfast that followed it, sweet potato biscuits and coffee in a kitchen that doubled as a living room, had no reason to continue. There is something most food histories leave out. For 13 years, the Speakeasy was the only restaurant most Black Americans could own. Jim Crow kept Black diners out of white establishments across the South and in most of the North. There was no sitting at the counter. There was no table by the window. but behind an unmarked door, a black woman with a stove and a bottle could run her own business, set her own prices, and feed her own people without asking permission from anyone. The buffet flat was not just a place to drink. It was the first black-owned dining room in a country that refused to seat black customers. The food that came out of those kitchens was not restaurant food. It was survival food dressed up for a Saturday night. And when Prohibition ended, the legal world that replaced it did not make room for the people who had built something real in the dark. Number 20, fried porgies. Nobody with money wanted porgy. In the coastal speakeasies of Charleston and Savannah, that made it perfect. Bought whole from the docks for almost nothing, scaled and gutted in the back, dredged in cornmeal and salt, and fried in a pan of lard until the skin crackled. A plate of fried porgies with a wedge of lemon and a piece of bread was a full meal at a speakeasy table. The fish was sweet and firm when fresh and worthless a day later, which meant it moved fast. After repeal, the waterfront speakeasy shut down. Legal fish houses served shrimp and flounder. Porgy dropped off the plate and onto the bait hook. Number 19, stewed okra with tomatoes. This is the dish that held entire neighborhoods together during Prohibition and left almost no trace when it ended. In the juke joints and speakeasies of the Deep South, a cast iron pot of okra and tomatoes sat on the stove from Friday afternoon to Sunday morning. The okra came from backyard gardens, the tomatoes from mason jars put up the summer before, and the seasoning was whatever pork scrap sat in the icebox. Onions, garlic, a bay leaf, sometimes a dried pepper. It cooked low and slow until the okra broke down into a thick, silky stew that clung to a plate of rice like it belonged there. The pot never emptied. When it got low, the cook added water, more okra, another jar of tomatoes. It was the original endless bowl, and it cost the house almost nothing to keep running. Customers paid for drinks. The stew was the reason they stayed long enough to order another round. In the juke joints of rural Mississippi and Alabama, this pot fed field workers, musicians, and anyone who walked through the door on a Saturday night with enough change for a glass. After Prohibition, the juke joints that turned legal stripped down to a jukebox and a liquor license. The kitchen shrank or disappeared entirely. The communal pot of okra and tomatoes that once simmered for 2 days straight had no stove to sit on. The dish survived in home kitchens, but the speakeasy version, endless and shared, was finished. Number 18, pickled beet salad. Beets kept through the winter in a jar of vinegar and sugar, and in the speakeasies of the Upper South and the Midwest, a dish of sliced pickled beets with raw onion rings was a standard side. It sat on the counter in a bowl all night, free for the taking. The vinegar cut through the grease of whatever else was cooking, and the sweetness paired with corn liquor better than most food did. It was practical, not elegant. After repeal, the legal bars that replaced the speakeasies did not serve pickled beets. They served pretzels and peanuts. The beet bowl vanished from the counter overnight. Number 17, fried chicken wings with hot sauce. Long before Buffalo had a claim on the wing, black speakeasies across the South and the Great Migration cities were serving fried chicken wings as drinking food. Wings were the part of the bird the butcher could not sell to anyone who had a choice. In speakeasy kitchens, they got seasoned, fried hard, and tossed in a vinegar-based hot sauce that stained the fingers and made the next drink come faster. A bucket of wings sat on the bar, and people grabbed one without stopping the conversation. There was no plate, no napkin, no ceremony. When Prohibition ended and the speakeasy kitchens closed, the wing disappeared from bar food for nearly 50 years. It resurfaced in 1964 in Buffalo, New York, stripped of its black speakeasy roots entirely. Number 16, giblet gravy over rice. The giblets were the parts nobody wanted: the heart, the liver, the neck, the gizzard. Chopped fine and simmered in a flour-thickened gravy with onion and black pepper, they turned into something rich and filling poured over a plate of white rice. In the speakeasies and buffet flats of Memphis, Birmingham, and Jackson, giblet gravy was a midnight dish, cheap to make, easy to stretch, and satisfying enough to keep a room full of people buying drinks until 2 in the morning. The cook made one pot and it fed the house. After 1933, the midnight kitchen that served giblet gravy had no reason to stay open. Legal bars sold liquor without food. The gravy pot cooled and never went back on the stove. Number 15, scrapple. After an all-night session in the black speakeasies of Philadelphia and Baltimore, scrapple showed up at dawn. It was a loaf made from pork scraps, cornmeal, and spices, chilled until firm, then sliced and fried in a hot pan until the outside crisped and the inside stayed soft. The taste was savory, faintly herby, and unlike anything else on the plate. Philadelphia's 7th Ward, the center of black life in the city, had speakeasies that served sliced scrapple with eggs and coffee as the sun came up. It was recovery food for a community that worked hard and stayed out late. When Prohibition ended, the all-night establishments closed their doors, and the dawn breakfast that followed them stopped being served. Most histories of Prohibition end on December 5th, 1933. They should not. When repeal came, America celebrated, but for black communities, it solved nothing. The legal bars and restaurants that reopened did not welcome black patrons. In the South, Jim Crow kept every lunch counter segregated. In the North, the rules were unwritten but just as firm. The speakeasy had been the one place where a black cook could feed her community on her own terms. Repeal took that away without offering anything in return. The women who ran those kitchens did not get restaurant licenses. They did not get bank loans. They did not get storefronts on the main street. They went back to cooking in their own homes for their own families, and the dishes they had served to a packed room on a Saturday night became private meals for a table of 4. The food did not die. It went quiet. Number 14, black-eyed pea cakes. Yesterday's pot of black-eyed peas, mashed with a fork, mixed with an egg and enough cornmeal to hold it together, shaped into patties and fried in a hot skillet. That was the whole recipe, and in the juke joints and speakeasies of the rural South, it turned leftover beans into bar food. The cakes came out crisp on the outside and creamy in the center, with a mineral, earthy taste that went well with whiskey. They were cheap, fast, and easy to eat standing up. After Prohibition ended, the juke joints that kept their doors open stopped frying bean cakes. The menu shrank to whatever could be served without a cook. The pea cake went out the door with the cook who fried it. Number 13, hush puppies cooked in lard. The cornmeal fritter known as the hush puppy existed before Prohibition, but the speakeasy turned it into something specific. In the fish fry joints and juke joints of the Carolinas and the Gulf Coast, hush puppies were fried in the same lard as the fish and served hot in a paper sack at the door. The batter was cornmeal, buttermilk, egg, and diced onion, and the lard gave them a flavor that no modern fryer reproduces. They were the first thing a customer tasted walking in, and the last thing carried out in a greasy sack. After repeal, the fish fry joints cleaned up. Vegetable oil replaced lard. Deep fryers replaced the cast iron pot. The hush puppy survived, but the lard fried original did not. Number 12, crawfish stew. Crawfish were free in rural Louisiana. They came out of the ditch behind the building after a heavy rain. The stew was built on a dark roux, thickened with flour and fat, loaded with crawfish tails, onion, celery, and green pepper, and ladled over rice. It was Cajun in technique and Black in tradition, served in a room where the music was loud and the whiskey was clear. A pot of crawfish stew could feed a speakeasy for an entire evening off ingredients that cost next to nothing. After repeal, legal Cajun restaurants claimed the crawfish tradition as their own. The Black speakeasy version, rougher and built on ditch-caught crawfish, had no seat at the new table. Number 11, buttermilk biscuits with sorghum syrup. Sorghum was the sweetener of the Black South long before refined sugar became affordable. In the rent parties of Harlem and the juke joints of Tennessee, hot buttermilk biscuits split open and drizzled with dark sorghum syrup were a late-night offering. The biscuits were baked in a pan and served warm, and the sorghum gave them a deep, almost bitter sweetness that refined sugar could never match. It was comfort food disguised as a snack. After 1933, sorghum production declined as cheap white sugar took over. The biscuit and sorghum combination faded from public tables and into the memories of families who still kept a jug in the pantry. Number 10, pan-fried pork tenderloin. A pork tenderloin pounded flat, breaded in seasoned flour, and fried in a cast iron skillet until golden brown sent a smell through the walls that reached the street. In the speakeasies of Indianapolis, Kansas City, and Chicago's South Side, the pan-fried tenderloin was the expensive plate. It cost more than the gizzards and the beans because the cut was better, and it announced that this was not a soup kitchen. This was a place where people came to be treated well. The tenderloin hung off the edges of the plate because nobody trimmed it to fit. A pile of white bread and a scoop of coleslaw sat next to it, and the whole thing cost a fraction of what a legal restaurant would have charged for the same meal. The smell was the problem. Police on the beat in Black neighborhoods during Prohibition knew that the scent of frying pork behind a closed door meant an unlicensed kitchen, which meant unlicensed liquor. Raids on Black speakeasies often started with the smell, not a tip. After repeal, the tenderloin sandwich moved into Midwestern diners, breaded and institutional. But the speakeasy version, pounded by hand and fried behind a locked door, the version that could get a whole room arrested, did not survive. Number 9, fried perch. River perch pulled from the water that morning in Mississippi, Arkansas, and western Tennessee got cleaned, salted, rolled in cornmeal, and fried by evening in the back of a juke joint. The fish was small and sweet, and people ate it with their fingers, pulling the meat off the bone and leaving the skeleton on the edge of the plate. River perch was too small for the white market and too plentiful to charge much for. After Prohibition, the riverside juke joints that fried perch moved on to catfish and crappie, fish big enough to fillet. The whole fried perch, eaten with bare hands at a juke joint table, quietly disappeared. Number 8, cornmeal mush with cane syrup. Cornmeal boiled in water until it thickened into a porridge and served with a pour of cane syrup was the breakfast of Black speakeasy workers, not the customers, the workers. The women who cooked all night and cleaned up at dawn ate cornmeal mush because it was fast, cheap, and filling, and because everything else in the kitchen belonged to the business. In the buffet flats of Harlem and the juke joints of the Delta, the mush pot sat on the back burner all morning. After Prohibition, the establishments closed and the overnight kitchen shift ended. The breakfast that sustained the women who ran those kitchens had no one left to feed. Number 7, potato cakes. Leftover mashed potatoes from the night before, mixed with an egg, a little flour, and a pinch of salt, then shaped into patties and fried in a hot skillet. In the speakeasies of the Black Midwest and Upper South, potato cakes were morning food served after the last customer left. They were also economy food, turning yesterday's side dish into today's main course. Nothing went to waste in a speakeasy kitchen. The potato cake was a monument to that discipline. After 1933, home cooks kept frying potato cakes, but the speakeasy version, cooked in a skillet that had fed a crowd the night before, seasoned by layers of accumulated flavor, was a different thing entirely. That version ended with the room. Number 6, smoked ham with biscuits. A whole smoked ham hung in the back of nearly every black speakeasy in the South. It was sliced thin by hand, laid on a split biscuit, and handed across the counter. One ham lasted a week if the crowd was small, and 2 nights if the joint was popular. The smoke was hickory or oak, depending on the region, and the salt was heavy because the ham had to keep without refrigeration in a room that never cooled down. After repeal, the country ham hung in pantries and smokehouses, not in bar rooms. The specific act of slicing smoked ham behind a bar for a customer holding a glass in the other hand had no place in the legal world that followed. Number 5, fried oysters. Oysters were cheap in the 1920s. Along the Gulf Coast and the Eastern Seaboard, they were working class food, and in the black speakeasies of Mobile and New Orleans and Baltimore, fried oysters were a small luxury that cost next to nothing, dredged in cornmeal and fried in lard until the edges curled and the center stayed briny and soft. They came to the counter on a piece of newspaper. A dozen cost less than a drink. The oyster bars that operated inside black speakeasies were some of the only places in America where a black customer could sit down and eat oysters without being told to leave. After Prohibition, oyster prices climbed slowly through the 1940s and 1950s. By the time they became expensive, the speakeasy oyster bar was already gone. Number 4, sweet potato pie. In the rent parties of Harlem, slices of sweet potato pie were sold at the door alongside plates of food and cups of whiskey. The pie was baked in a lard crust, the filling spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a little vanilla, and it set up dense and custard smooth. It was not dessert, it was part of the price of admission, and the women who baked them turned a few cents worth of sweet potatoes into money that covered a month's rent. Sweet potato pie survived Prohibition, but the rent party version, baked by the dozen and sold by the slice to strangers in a crowded apartment, that specific tradition ended when the parties did. The pie lived on. The reason for baking it changed forever. Number 3, fried chicken livers. Livers were the part of the chicken that got pulled out first and dropped in a bowl for the cook. In the speakeasy kitchens of the Black South and the Great Migration cities, that bowl became a dish. The livers were dredged in seasoned flour and fried fast in hot lard, half a minute per side, until the outside browned and the inside stayed pink. They were served on a saucer with a toothpick in each one. Bar food before anyone used the term. The flavor was iron-rich and strong, the kind of taste that pairs with a stiff drink, which was exactly the point. After Prohibition, chicken livers moved to home kitchens and church dinners. The speakeasy saucer with the toothpicks never came back. Number 2, turnip green soup. Not turnip greens as a side dish, a soup. In the speakeasies and juke joints of rural Alabama and Georgia, turnip greens got simmered in a broth made from whatever bone was on hand until the greens melted into the liquid. The result was a thin, smoky, Potlikker-heavy soup that could be ladled into a cup and sipped alongside a drink. It warmed the hands and the chest in winter and filled the stomach without slowing anyone down. A pot cost nearly nothing and lasted all night. After 1933, turnip greens stayed on Southern tables, but the soup form served in a cup at a juke joint bar went away. The greens went back to the plate. The cup stayed in the cabinet. Number 1, the kitchen behind the door. This is not a single dish. It is all 30 of them and everyone that did not make this countdown. For 13 years, Black women ran kitchens that were illegal by definition and essential by necessity. They cooked with lard and cast iron and whatever the market had left at closing time, and they fed their communities in rooms the law said should not exist. When Prohibition ended, America got its bars back. Black America lost its kitchens. The buffet flat cooks did not get restaurant licenses. The juke joint women did not get bank loans. The rent party hosts did not get dining rooms. They got silence. 30 dishes disappeared, not because anyone stopped being hungry, but because the rooms they were made in were no longer needed. The food was never the crime. The door was. Banana pudding with meringue crowned many 1960s wedding dessert tables, its golden peaks and creamy layers drawing admiration before the first spoonful was served. The pudding was cooked slowly on the stovetop, eggs and milk and sugar stirred constantly until thick and silky. Vanilla wafers were layered with sliced bananas and pudding in large dishes, each tier soaking into the one below until everything melded together. The meringue was whipped by hand until stiff, spread across the top, and browned under the broiler until peaks formed. Timing mattered. Made close enough to serving that meringue stayed high, but early enough for layers to soften. Women earned reputation based on their banana pudding, with invitations sometimes accepted specifically because a certain cook was providing dessert. It represented patience, skill, and love. Pinto beans and fatback was the dish that nobody bragged about and everybody loved. Dried beans, soaked overnight, started on the stove before anyone was fully awake with a thick slab of fatback, salted, cured pork fat from the back of the hog, going in whole so its fat could slowly melt into the broth. Onion, garlic, a little black pepper, and 4 hours of low heat. The beans softened into something so deeply flavored that a bowl over white rice with a square of cornbread was all anyone needed. The secret was the salt. You never added it early because salt at the beginning toughens the bean skin and keeps the center hard. You waited until the beans had given in completely, until the broth had thickened on its own. Only then. In Jim Crow era, Black households across the South, this dish appeared weekly, not because nothing else was available, but because no one had yet invented a reason to stop making it. That is a kind of loyalty that belongs only to the best food. Number 22, tea cakes. These were not fancy, they were not decorated. They were simple, round, slightly sweet cookies that Black mothers baked by the dozen for Sunday visits, church picnics, and any afternoon when the children needed something before supper. Tea cakes date back to the 1700s, when enslaved people created their own version of European confections using the ingredients they had: flour, butter, sugar, eggs, vanilla, and a pinch of nutmeg. The recipes were never written down. They passed from mother to daughter by feel. You knew the dough was right when it felt like your grandmother's dough. A woman named Polly Ann Jackson in Tyler, Texas, made tea cakes her entire life and eventually started a business selling them. She used the same recipe her grandmother had used during Reconstruction. Tea cakes are one of the oldest desserts in Black American cooking, passed down generation after generation, and almost nobody under 40 makes them anymore. Collard greens, simmered with ham hocks, brought soul and substance to 1960s African American wedding receptions, their deep green color representing home and heritage. The greens were washed multiple times to remove grit, stripped from stems, and cooked low and slow with smoked ham hocks that flavored every leaf. Onions, garlic, and a splash of vinegar balanced the richness, while a pinch of sugar softened any bitterness. The greens cooked for hours until silky tender, served with cooking liquid spooned over top. Guests ladled portions onto plates alongside other dishes, the familiar taste grounding celebration in everyday comfort. Collards were inexpensive and stretched far, one large batch feeding dozens. This dish connected wedding joy to Sunday dinner tradition, reminding everyone that celebration and home cooking belong together. Fried chicken wings piled high on platters were the finger food that disappeared fastest at 1960s wedding receptions, their crispy coating and tender meat satisfying guests of all ages. Wings were the cheapest part of the chicken, often sold in bulk at prices whole birds could not match. Seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, then dredged in flour and fried in cast iron until golden, the wings emerged crackling hot and deeply flavorful. They could be eaten without utensils, perfect for guests mingling through reception lines. Church mothers fried batches in home kitchens, timing the cooking so wings arrived warm. The bones made them easier to handle, and children especially loved grabbing them from platters. Wings represented practical generosity, providing protein to crowds without straining budgets. Smothered chicken was a Sunday centerpiece in most Black households of the 1960s, and it announced the week was over and the family was home. A whole chicken cut into pieces, seasoned deep with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredged in flour and browned in a cast iron skillet until golden. Then the chicken came out and the gravy went in. Onions, bell pepper, stock scraped up from the bottom where all the flavor had pooled. The chicken went back in, the lid went on, and the heat went low for an hour. By the time it was done, the meat had given everything to the gravy, and the gravy had given it back. In kitchens from Birmingham to Chicago, this was the dish that made you feel like someone meant for you to be there. You can still find the recipe. What you cannot find, what no amount of technique will replace, is the woman who stood at that stove and made you feel like the most important person in the world just by handing you a plate. Number 25, sweet potato pie. This was not pumpkin pie with a different name. This was its own creation, built from a root vegetable that traveled from West Africa to Southern soil and ended up on every holiday table in every Black household from Alabama to Chicago. Your mother peeled the sweet potatoes, boiled them soft, mashed them with butter and sugar and cinnamon and nutmeg, added eggs and evaporated milk, and poured it all into a crust she made from flour and lard. The whole pie cost about 40 cents in 1963. In some families, sweet potato pie showed up at Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and every funeral in between. A woman in Memphis named Ora Lee Johnson made 11 of them every Thanksgiving for her church. She used to say that pumpkin pie was for people who did not know any better. That was tradition. Candied yams glistened on 1960s wedding reception tables, their sweet orange surfaces catching the light and drawing guests toward the serving line. Sweet potatoes were peeled, sliced thick, and layered in baking dishes with brown sugar, butter, and spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. As they baked low and slow, the sugar melted into syrup, coating each slice with sticky sweetness. Some cooks added orange juice or pineapple for brightness, while others kept it simple to let the potatoes shine. The dish had to be served warm, its fragrance mixing with other foods to create the distinctive smell of celebration. Candied yams connected wedding tables to holiday traditions, bringing comfort and familiarity. They were affordable yet indulgent, proving that simple ingredients handled with care could produce something extraordinary. Sweet potato pie was often the only dessert rivaling the wedding cake itself, its spiced filling and flaky crust representing generations of baking knowledge. The sweet potatoes were roasted until tender, then mashed smooth with butter, sugar, eggs, and spices, including cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla. The filling was poured into homemade crust and baked until set, the top turning golden and slightly cracked at the edges. Each family had their own recipe, guarded closely and revealed only to daughters deemed worthy of the knowledge. The pies were often made by the bride's mother or grandmother, their presence on the table a stamp of family tradition. Sliced thin to serve more guests, sweet potato pie was eaten alongside wedding cake or instead of it. Its familiar taste carried more meaning than any fancy frosted confection could. But crackling bread belonged to the kitchens that made it, and you either grew up knowing it or you didn't. When a hog was slaughtered in the fall, the skin was cut into strips and rendered until the fat cooked out, and what remained were cracklings, brittle, salty, savory pieces that crunched between your back teeth. The best went straight into cornbread batter, cornmeal, buttermilk, an egg, and fresh cracklings folded through, then poured into a screaming hot skillet until the bottom crust turned deep brown and the inside stayed soft. The cracklings distributed through the bread like hidden pockets, some crisp at the edge, some soft near the center. By the 1960s, this bread was already slipping away. The hog slaughter was becoming a memory as families moved north and supermarkets replaced the smokehouse. You had to know someone who still made it. You had to be from somewhere specific, a place where the cold November air still smelled like wood smoke and rendered fat on a Saturday morning. Number 24, banana pudding. There was a time when banana pudding showed up at every church supper, every family reunion, and every repast in the Black community. The kind your mother made in a glass baking dish with layers of Nilla wafers. Sliced bananas, homemade vanilla custard cooked on the stove, and meringue browned in the oven. The Nabisco company started printing a banana pudding recipe on its box in the 1940s. But Black mothers had been making their own versions long before that. The custard was cooked slowly on a low flame, stirred constantly so it would not scorch. A single pan fed 20 people at a church picnic and cost less than $1. In your grandmother's kitchen, banana pudding was not a recipe, it was a language. It said, "Welcome home." It said, "Happy birthday," without needing a single candle. Tea, cakes appeared at wedding receptions as symbols of continuity. These simple cookies connecting the celebration to generations of family traditions, made from flour, butter, sugar, eggs, and a touch of nutmeg or vanilla. They were mixed by hand and rolled on floured counters. Each cookie was cut round and baked until just set, never browned, producing soft discs that yielded gently to the bite. Tea cakes were not overly sweet, making them perfect alongside punch or coffee without overwhelming the palate. Many brides requested them specifically because their grandmothers had served tea cakes at their own weddings decades before. The recipe varied by family, some adding nutmeg, while others preferred lemon zest. Arranged on platters or packed into tins, tea cakes whispered of heritage and keeping traditions alive. There is a difference between a lima bean and a butter bean that cannot be explained to someone who didn't grow up eating both. Butter beans, the large, pale, starchy variety, braised low and slow in broth with smoked turkey wings or smoked neck bones until the skins went translucent and the insides turned silky. The broth thickened around them without a roux or a thickener, just the starch from the beans releasing over time, the smoke from the meat settling in. On fall weeknights, this was what sat in the middle of the table while the family came in from work and school. It required only a bowl and the woman who had been cooking it all afternoon. She was the kind of cook who could tell by feel when the beans had crossed from done to right. Not the same thing. Done meant cooked through. Right meant ready. Softer at the edge, holding shape in the center, the broth at exactly that thickness. She is gone. The beans still exist. The right of it left with her. Number 23, peach cobbler. If you grew up in a black household in the South, you remember the sound of peach cobbler before you remember the taste, the bubbling, the crust cracking in the oven. Black mothers made cobbler from fresh peaches in summer and canned peaches in winter. The crust was biscuit dough, sometimes rolled, sometimes dropped in rough spoonfuls on top of the fruit. Sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, a little vanilla, a generous amount of butter. That was the whole recipe. In rural Georgia and Mississippi, families picked peaches from trees in their yards. There was no cost. In the cities, a can of peaches cost 15 cents. A cobbler fed 8. Your mother did not need a cookbook for this. She needed a deep pan, a hot oven, and enough butter to make the crust golden. They were following a memory. 7-Up cake was the modern marvel of 1960s wedding dessert tables. Its light texture and subtle citrus flavor coming from fizzy soda stirred right into the batter. The recipe called for a box of lemon cake mix, vanilla pudding, eggs, oil, and a full bottle of 7-Up that made the cake rise high and stay impossibly moist. Baked in bundt pans, the cake emerged golden and tender, often glazed with powdered sugar and lemon juice that dripped down the ridges. Brides loved it because the recipe was nearly foolproof, producing consistent results even for nervous cooks. The soda was cheap, the mix affordable, and results impressed guests who asked for the recipe. 7-Up cake represented the optimism of the era, embracing convenience products to create something celebratory. It showed tradition and innovation could share the same spread. Number 21, pound cake. Every black mother in the 1960s had a pound cake recipe, and every one of them believed hers was the best. The original formula was simple: 1 pound of butter, 1 pound of sugar, 1 pound of eggs, 1 pound of flour. That was it. No baking powder, no baking soda. The rise came from beating the eggs long enough to trap air in the batter. Your mother stood at the counter and creamed butter and sugar by hand with a wooden spoon for 15 minutes until her arm ached. The cake baked low and slow, sometimes for an hour and a half. A good pound cake was dense, moist, and golden. It did not need frosting. It sat on a plate under a glass dome, and it was the first thing offered to anyone who walked through the front door. In the black church, pound cake was currency. That cake was proof that someone in the house knew how to bake. Mustard potato salad held a place of honor at 1960s African-American wedding receptions, its tangy yellow color brightening tables alongside other dishes. Unlike mayonnaise-heavy versions, this style relied on prepared yellow mustard for its tang, mixed with chopped hard-boiled eggs, pickle relish, and diced celery and onion. The potatoes were boiled until just tender, never mushy, then cubed while warm so they absorbed the dressing better. Some cooks added sugar to balance the mustard's sharpness, while others preferred bold pucker. The salad was made a day ahead so flavors could meld overnight, then served cold in large bowls. Children often avoided it, preferring sweeter options, but adults returned for seconds. For many families, the potato salad recipe was as precious as the wedding dress, passed down through generations of cooks. 30 dishes, 13 years of cooking behind locked doors, and not one of them vanished because the recipe failed. They vanished because the rooms closed and nobody built new ones for the women who had been cooking in them. Those kitchens earned more than silence. Pick one and make it this week. The deviled crab packed back into the shell. The corn fritters dropped by the spoonful into hot lard. The pork tenderloin pounded flat and fried until it hung off the plate. And if your grandmother kept a speakeasy recipe alive that never made it into any cookbook, put it in the comments. That recipe deserves to be part of the record.